If you were in the prior session, you heard some really compelling comments from Alan Groves, the Dean of Students from the University of Virginia, and Caitlin Flanagan, an investigative reporter and journalist. Caitlin probably put it best. She said that fraternities are at a historic crossroads and that there's a need to evolve. And we believe in having a dialogue about that with our members. So this has been set up in very much a town hall fashion, somewhat informal, an opportunity for us to share some thoughts as a board with the members, the brothers here and guests here in attendance, and also to field questions, as I mentioned in the last session. Field some questions from everyone in this room about the priorities of the fraternity, some of the challenges that we face, sharing opportunities, and discussing a path forward. And we're all on the stage because we love the fraternity. We want to see it be successful and believe that this is an opportunity for us to really provide tremendous value to undergraduates. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Rick, who's going to kind of kick us off here in this discussion.
Well, I'd start by wanting to pick on a word that you used and picked up from Caitlin, and that's the use of the word crossroads, that we are at a crossroads. And I think the board, as it contemplates where we are today, is not thinking of this so much as a crossroads, because that just indicates a couple of paths that you could take and somehow that they're equal in their value. I think that we look at today's environment as an existential crisis. Our being, our ability to move forward and actually be an organization in the future is being challenged. And we have to decide that since we believe in it, and we believe in it deeply, what are we going to do to be able to change that course? Because we are definitely headed down a path where we are being challenged and our very existence is at risk. And I think that the board views this in many ways as a burning platform. That's a word that's used from time to time, a crisis, and a real opportunity to make change and to push forward in a very positive way, because we are at a flashpoint, at a point of crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it in a similar fashion as an opportunity. I mean, SigEp, in my opinion, has done a lot in the past 20 years to set itself up to be in a great position now. But that doesn't mean that we settle here. There's a lot of things that are still issues, that have been issues in the past, that we need to continue to address, need to continue to be the leaders in that arena. I take great pride when I talk to a lot of people in higher education and they compliment us for the things that we do. But they always say, and what we really like about you guys is you never think your job is done. Like, you always try to figure out what the next issue is, or how to make your members even better. One of the things that Alan said that I agree with is, we're here. When we were founded, we were basically founded to better our members, but also, he also said later, we're part of a host institution that we need to figure out how to partner with better. And we've always said that that's, at least since I've been on the board, we've always said that that's a priority for us. Bringing in critics or people that are perceived as critics or people that are outsiders is something that not a lot of fraternities do, right? And anyone who owns a business or is a savvy leader understands that you have to listen to what everyone says, and that includes people that aren't necessarily drinking your Kool-Aid. And I'm really happy that we do that, and that helps the board kind of think about what the next steps should be. It also gives us perspective about what other people think, because there's only so many of us, and there's a whole lot more outsiders. So if we're not tapping into that source, then we're destined to fail, I think.
Yeah, and sadly, the challenge is greater than what we've already kind of put forward and heard today, in the sense that we're really only as good as the weakest chapter in our Greek system. So you talk about a burden, having to not only do great things at your chapter and set the standard and be leaders, but at the same time, this notion of interfraternalism and what we do, because it's systems that are at risk as much as our chapters are at risk. And I think we've got to find a way to not only do well in your chapter, but to ensure the health of your system. And sometimes there's behavior in certain Greek systems that you would say is abhorrent and ridiculous, and you don't agree with it, and that's not like us. It's not like SigEp saying, you know what, you may go down with the ship if that system shuts down. And so that's another real challenge that we've got to face.
Well, one of the things that we talk about as we meet and contemplate, we've always had this aspiration, this goal that we would be the best fraternity, and we've worked hard on it, whether it's GPA or Balanced Man or the different things that we've done. And I think we're crossing the line that says that's not good enough. That's like being the tallest midget in a circus. We need to start thinking in terms about being the best organization on campus, and that we're additive to the entire process, and just being the best frat, it's not good enough. We have to set our sights much higher than that.
Yeah, I mean, so I've worked with colleges and universities for 25 years, either inside as a university administrator or now, for the past 15 years as a consultant to colleges. And one of the things that I notice is it's very, very difficult for a university to not see fraternities as the same as, they may have good interactions with a SigEp chapter, but they don't have the bandwidth to treat SigEp differently than the other fraternities. They don't have, it's also not fair, right? It's very hard for them to treat us differently. And one of the things I think we need to think about is how do we make it almost impossible for them not to treat us differently? Like, what can we be doing for the university administration and the faculty and parents to say, yes, fraternities, but they're SigEp? And that's really hard to do on that campus, but I think we do that in some places. I mean, I know in some of our chapters, they're not just IFC best chapter, they're student organization of the year, or I know we've had a couple of places where they're actually community service organization for that county. And really that's, I think the elevation that you're talking about is we have to think differently. I mean, we love that, everyone loves that saying, right? SigEp was created to be different, but people have caught up, right? There are other groups that have really started to do some things that they've emulated us in many ways, but they've caught up in some areas. So what can we continue to be doing to stay in the forefront of that and be different so that they see us differently and not just say that we're different, but really be making a positive impact for our undergraduates, making a positive impact for our alumni, and making a difference in the community.
Well, you made the point earlier about listening to critics, and today was maybe, Brian, one of the first times we've really had this kind of a forum where, I'm not sure both of them would want to characterize themselves as hostile witnesses, but they would certainly come to bring a critique.
Alan's certainly willing to ask tough questions.
Right, to bring a critique. And we've talked about that a lot at the board, about how do we do that better, and how does the board not be quite so insular, SigEp's talking about SigEp problems, and in some ways you often get into solving specific issues with a chapter, and I can't say it any better than, you end up playing small ball a little bit. You're solving these small little problems, and in trying to play big ball, how do we do a much better job of moving forward? And so the concept of having outsiders consult to the board is something we've been talking about, and I think in the next couple of days there'll be discussion at the Grand Chapter about actually crossing that line in a definitive way and introducing the concept of outside directors, people that are not SigEps being on our national board to help the conversation elevate the conversation and get it to a higher level.
One of the things that I thought was interesting about the conversation was the analogy of a boiling pot, right? And when I was in RD a long time ago, I mean, I think I can think back to when I was traveling, and I could say, there's something's going on here with this chapter. And one of the things I'm proud of for the fraternity is us being proactive about seeing those things. I mean, I know a lot of other groups that don't react until there's a tragedy. And really, by then, it's not just a too late because of the PR, which is a problem, but it's too late because you could have prevented that student or other people in the community from going through, all sorts of different things, court, death, family tragedy, the hardship of seeing a chapter close, all that stuff. And I think people, none of us here like to discipline chapters. It's not really what we love to do. We would much rather never have to do that. But I can tell you that the model of coming in proactively and working with chapters to help them get better, when a chapter really wants to get better, it takes off. When a chapter is there and doesn't want to be what SigEp is supposed to be, it creates a difficult situation. And ultimately, either the chapter and the members, either the members are able to turn that around, or we're forced into a situation where we have to discipline the chapter.
Yeah, so I'll speak to undergraduates and the volunteers here too, and that's the approach that the staff takes every time that we're leaving Richmond, we're coming to a chapter visit. It's to proactively help, and it's to challenge, because we don't want to be in a reactive position. I mean, that typically ends bad when we find ourselves in that place. It typically ends in a bad place. When we're staying out front.
What creates the reactive situation? What do you think is the biggest?
One of the things that Alan talked about, self-governance. And self-governance is extremely important on college campuses, and maybe Caitlin rightfully references some of the big challenges of young men trying to step in and intervene with peers, and it's very hard. And the other thing I think to acknowledge or say is that everyone up here acknowledges that. And that thought isn't lost on the staff, it's not lost on the board. Confident intervention is difficult. Stepping in and saying, no, don't do that, that's hard. The volunteers that are here for the undergraduates, the volunteers that are here, the staff that comes and visits your chapter, that they're there to help. If there's a difficult situation, we want to be proactive. We don't want to find ourselves in that reactive place.
Even though I think some people think it's the same thing, in my experience consulting with fraternities and sororities, there's a clear line between being loyal to your brotherhood and being loyal to your fraternity. Those aren't always the same thing, right? And that is to me the hardest thing for a leader in the chapter to discern, is just because you love that guy and you'll do anything for that guy does not mean that you should not say, you are bad for the fraternity right now, you need to stop what you're doing. Because a lot of that reaction, hey, it's okay, we'll figure it out, let's cover stuff up, or don't say anything, let him do what he's doing, that's really, in my opinion, what leads to a lot of these problems becoming.
Well, let me pivot off of that a little bit. There's discussion of sexual assault earlier today, hazing, and of substance abuse, alcohol abuse specifically. One thing that was not spoken as directly is intolerance. Certainly Alan addressed the issue of diversity, and Caitlin talked about more open, good, healthy argument and exchange of conflict of ideas. But to me, those are the sort of the four issues: hazing, sexual assault, substance abuse, and intolerance are the big four in my mind of the things that we have to wrestle with. And I guess they're real, and it's not just a fraternity thing. It's a thing that people, certainly men, but all people deal with. And so the question is, what's our role in all of that? And to me, the choice that we have to make is, are we the cauldron, the pot that encourages that facilitates that, or are we the mitigator of it? Because it's not going to go away. And Caitlin's talking about going to the reservoir and taking some beers. I don't know about you.
Tom.
I was there.
Yeah.
And it sounded like a damn good time.
That's Tom's story.
And it's and it's not just 18-year-olds. I know some people that indulge in risky behavior from time to time when they're older, right? So it's not going to go away. It's a question of managing it and helping your brother. And that being part of the responsibility of being a good human being, rather than just somebody that's setting rules and having an onerous place. So being a leader on the campus that creates the safe haven, that creates the ability to have the checkpoint, not to squash having fun, or to say that risk management is going to go to zero, because those aren't realistic. But are we the facilitator of bad behavior, or are we the mitigator of bad behavior?
Right.
That's the question.
And what we owe you as a board is strong local volunteer leadership, because it's tough. The expectations that when we're 18 to 21 or 22, we make great decisions all the time. You turn over so rapidly in the chapter, just through, naturally through the process of going to school, that we know that the best chapters have solid, long-term local alumni leadership, and that's part of what you'll see and hear through the remainder of the conclave is the efforts to continue to boost that and to support you really on the front line of the fraternity so that you've got resources in your backyard that you can use.
And for the volunteers that are delivering that, just to say thank you. If you're an undergraduate, to say thank you. For us, we try to make a conscious effort to say thank you more often. And it's an invaluable contribution that volunteers make. As mentors, they change lives. And as Chris said, it is the continuity that keeps our chapter strong.
So this is supposed to be a town hall, right?
It is.
So there are some questions that we ought to field, or?
Yeah, we've talked back and forth for a while, so we've got probably some questions over there, Seth. Why don't you pose a few that you've received?
There's been a lot of talk about Phi Delta's decision to have dry housing. We often say that we're a fraternity of first. On this topic, is it time to catch up?
Dry housing, Chris.
Yeah, so it's a great challenge. And if there's a sexual assault question, or if you're having a problem with your car, just turn to me and I'll try and answer that question. I'm really proud of what our interfraternity brothers did at Phi Delta. And I think this notion that they have attracted a different type of person, interestingly, not a person that doesn't drink. That's not necessarily what they've attracted. They've attracted someone who, from all the conversations we've had with them, are just a little bit more thoughtful and serious about the fun that they have and where they have it and when they have it. And so it wouldn't be surprising to me to, after hearing the presentation that we heard, for some people to say, that's a differentiator for us too.
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and I answer it in two ways. One is a lot of what Rick has hit on is the value of the experience and what we are supposed to be able to deliver our undergraduates. And for me, I visit a lot of campuses. I've met a lot of undergraduates, and I feel that it is SigEp's duty to help young men learn how to have relationships, learn how to have conversations that don't involve a beer can in a hand. And that's pretty hard for a lot of undergraduates today, a lot of college men today. It's hard. So we owe that to our members, the ability to have conversations without alcohol, without a beer can in your hand. And then the other side, and I'm asked to report to on the board on a regular basis, is alcohol is the number one underlying consistent variable in every single claim that we get. And if you're a chapter officer in the room, you've gotten a message from me on 2 years in a row, I guess now, unfortunately having to communicate that our insurance rates have gone up. And when you peel that back, a lot of it is coming back to alcohol. So I typically end up in those two places when I'm getting into these conversations and fielding similar questions from other executives or parents or volunteers.
Look, this fraternity has always been driven by the undergraduates. And Alan was talking about, last night we had dinner with Alan, and he was speaking about how things happen at his fraternity. And it appeared there was a stronger alumni hand in their legislative dealings than SigEp has. Yep. SigEp has always been driven by the undergraduates. And so, Seth, I think one of the answers to the question, the board could easily, mandate that we're going to, have dry housing. I'm not sure that's the best way to get to the right answer. The question is, where do the undergraduates want to go with this? And certainly, I personally would be incredibly supportive of that, along with smoke-free environments, by the way. But I think the undergraduates are going to have to take some leadership on the question.
Go ahead, Seth.
There's been a lot of news about the tragedy at our closed chapter at Clemson. Can you comment on this, and what have we learned from this tragedy?
Brian, you should probably do that.
I'm going to try and choose my words carefully here, too.
You have to understand that we want to talk about it completely, but it's an ongoing investigation and there's legal issues involved, so but Brian's the one that knows the most about it, and so I'll defer to him, but it's not like we don't want, I would love to just talk about everything all the time with everybody, but
So I
legal
guess
counsel.
here's what I will share is that a lot of what I've read, and I'm sure a lot of you have read in reports online or in print, the stories are they're disheartening. They make me extremely frustrated. Some of the things that I've read seem to be so absurd. I can't imagine that is what has happened, but it's what is being pushed out there, and there's a reason why this is an issue. And it's because a tragedy happened, and if there's just one thing that I can say, it's that we experienced our ritual last night, and we've talked a lot about values already in this conclave, and we have a responsibility to take care of our brothers, and that's. I think we approach our work in board meetings with that in mind. We have a duty as brothers to keep each other safe, to help each other make good decisions, to keep ourselves from getting into situations that are so risky that they could end in serious injury or death. From a staff perspective, working with chapters, I want there to be such a relationship where we can communicate honestly with each other. The staff is there to help. The board is there to help. The volunteers are there to help. There's a dialogue that can take place that is open, that is honest, that we can address issues or concerns in a constructive way. No one is there to, right out of the gate, come out and police people. Right? We just need to be in a position where we can help our chapters be their very best, and our volunteers the same way.
Aside from Clemson, I would say this to be direct about my point of view. Pledge programs lead to bad behavior. And I just think the number of incidents that occur and come to our table that fundamentally hinged off of either alcohol or a pledge program incident, that's where most of the incidents are coming around. And so I'd say, Clemson aside for a second, that's something we feel strongly about.
We all agree on that?
On that note, how should successful award-winning pledge model chapters feel about the effort being led by undergraduates to line our organization under the Balanced Man program? Why should they be compelled to change their model when it's been successful for them?
I guess my comment was ahead of schedule.
Yeah, go ahead.
Didn't know that was
Why
coming.
don't you just continue your thinking then? Please.
Pledging leads to bad behavior. Not 100% of the time, but the incidents of bad things happening coming off of pledge programs, and hazing is something that has been outlawed in our fraternity for years and years, but it still crops up, and it mostly crops up when it's associated with a pledge program. It's not to say that nothing bad ever happens in the BMP. I'm not trying to suggest that, but the propensity of things to occur in a pledging situation are much, much worse. It's time for it to go.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I came to Nashville with a lot of pride and excitement when I heard that this piece of legislation was being proposed. I think the undergraduates, maybe there are a few of them in the audience, maybe a lot of them in the audience here that have led this effort and have really required very little help from volunteers. The staff offered to help. There's a little bit of a stiff arm. That's fine. That's great. I mean, this is being led by undergraduates, and I think that is absolutely phenomenal. And Rick hit on it, that this is an undergraduate-led organization. And, district governors get a vote at the legislative session. Our directors get a vote at the legislative session. But undergraduates have 230 votes. And they've made all of the historic decisions for our organization. And this is another one. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is, at the point that whenever that does happen, it's not like the staff's going to say, all right, well, we expect you to be perfect right away. I mean, it's going to take, like, hey, let's put the elephant out here. There are a few BMP chapters that aren't doing it right. Okay, mine was one of them, and they went from 120 guys to 20 about 4 months ago because they kept doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing. Okay?
Right.
And the whole purpose of it is to be able to help everybody, provide the resources for everybody to do it their best way. We have statistics, we have a study, we have several studies that show it's actually better than pretty much anything else a young man can go through in college, right? So if we want the best for our members, why wouldn't we want that to happen?
You've been reading your book.
Yeah, so I'm a stats geek. I'm in higher education. I read things like the Journal of College Student Development.
I'm sorry, I just
Wow,
heard.
that was
I'm a
really
geek.
exciting.
Did you say
Yeah.
something?
Right?
Did you read that, Chris?
Notes weren't clear.
Like, there are studies that show that the stuff that we're trying to do make a bigger difference and prepare our members better for when they get out of college. It makes them better people. So why wouldn't we make that what we do? And so let me talk to whoever's out there that's in a pledge model chapter. Hey, I know it's scary, right? I remember when our chapter converted and everyone was like, oh, I don't know what this is. Is this like, what's going on? Are people going to even try and join our organization because they we're different? And the exact opposite happened for the group for a while they were doing it correctly. It was actually the attractor for all the people that don't want to be in a fraternity but have all the skills and the standards and the mindset that you want in the organization. Plus all the people that were sort of joining anyway, but you got them into the organization the right way, and it helped them develop even better. So another example that I wanted to give you, or another story is, I've seen chapters where there are great leaders and there are great people that come out of them, right? And I would argue, not all the time, but in many of those cases, those people didn't need SigEp. They were going to become great leaders anyway. And what this program does is it intentionally takes everybody that's in there and makes them better. If you were here, you're going to be here. And you can talk to the folks that are in chapters that do it correctly. It doesn't allow people to skate through and unintentionally just make it through fraternity and not become a better person. It has an intentionality to it through all 4 years that just other fraternities wish they could have.
I think we owe it to our members. I mean, set aside what may be negative about one model or positive about the other. We owe people a 4-year member development experience, and that should be an obligation. Just like we talk about being a focus on an undergraduate fraternity, but we owe alumni the opportunity to involve or re-involve and engage in that too. And so I think it's not just, we don't just owe them the first 8 or 10 weeks of their experience.
Many people feel that our challenge in leading SigEp is not convincing the people in this room that we need to change, but convincing the 90% of SigEps back at home that we need to change. What advice do you have to help us convince the masses that the change needs to occur?
You do this at Ruck, right?
Well, change takes time. And I think the thing that, the lesson for me in being able to facilitate change is being able to take the time for people to catch up. And so often, I remember my first experience as president of my undergraduate chapter. I was all charged up, coming back from Conclave, and had all this stuff that we wanted to do, and I stood up and gave a big speech, and some of you have heard the story, and I mean, it just felt so dead. It was awful, and there were some seniors in the back that were heckling, and the whole thing just fell apart, and I was just, I was crushed. And so the only thing I could figure out to do was what I always refer to as work in the halls, and it's, you go down one at a time, sit down with your brother, and you talk through it, and you find out what the issues are, and you start to resolve the issues before you get to the meeting. You're not going to solve anything in a meeting. You solve it sitting on the other guy's bed and talking it through, and you get, a couple of guys that you think can be supportive and make sure that they're armed to be able to proselytize the faith. Say that better?
You got it.
Yeah, and you get like the biggest guys that are going to be against you, and you work it through, and you figure out what the objections are, and you work it, and that's the only way to do it. You can't email it. You can't even really phone call it. You got to be sitting on the bed next to the guy and talk it through and resolve it before you get to the meeting. And I tell that story. I call it working the halls, and it's a question of taking time to let people catch up with you so that you can resolve the conflicts. And I'll just sort of end the little snippet by saying, so today I run a fairly large company and pay lots of people to, do what we say we want to do, and same thing happens because there's people in the back that, I'm signing a check and paying them. You'd think they'd go along. No, they disagree with what we're doing, and so you got to go to their office and sit down and work them through it because it's not about control. It's about the sharing of ideas and taking the time to move the process along through good logic and rhetoric.
Yeah, and the panel before said something that I think is extremely important, right? One of the hardest things to do is to hold your peers accountable. It's even extra hard for 17 to 25-year-olds, and it's even extra hard for males, okay? So that's one thing you have to combat. The second thing you have to combat is male groupthink is extremely powerful. It takes great chapters and makes them mediocre or worse, right? And Chris alluded to why you have, some of the reason you have alumni involvement and those kinds of things is to help mitigate some of that. But you as chapter leaders have to be aware of that and also understand that you need to mitigate that too. Dealing with individuals is going to get you far greater results than just dealing with an entire group of guys. You have to create a coalition. There's a book called Leading Change that talks about that. You have to create a coalition for any change you want to make. You talk to individuals and you make that happen. Otherwise, it's the same old story. But I also would encourage you to be able to see your own boiling pots. Okay? Each of you have boiling pots in your chapters. You can see it happening. And if you don't have them right now, great, pay attention. You'll see things, you'll hear things happening. And it's very easy, male groupthink can take really good ideas and quickly turn them into bad ideas. Let's have a philanthropy project. That's good, we can raise some money. Yes, we'll invite all the sororities, we'll do this. And then some guy says, and we can have a keg. That's a great idea. And then by the time the meeting's over, there's like midgets and donkeys and, strobe lights and all this stuff. And you were like, wait a minute, we just wanted to raise money for charity.
It's from Miami.
Yeah.
Right?
So it felt very South Beach.
It's not, story. I'm not, this is proven. Like, we've done studies on this. You guys can tell me, it's generalistic, of course. It's not always true. But it's easier for a group of men in a room between the ages of 17 and 25 to succumb to the lowest common denominator in the room than it is for a group of women 17 to 25 to do the same thing. Typically, if you go to a sorority meeting, they want to be as sharp, smart, articulate as the smartest, sharpest, most articulate woman in the room is. Okay? Generally. That doesn't mean they don't get in trouble. That doesn't mean they don't make dumb decisions. But generally, that's the mentality in that group. For us, we've done it on stage. We already start bantering around, and it's fun for us. It's how we're wired. But you have to be smart about how you handle that in your chapter, because if you aren't aware of it and you let it go down the wrong path, it could take, if there's no control, it could take you who knows where.
Yeah, and sometimes the wrong path isn't always disguised as kegs and donkeys.
Right.
Mr. South Beach. I mean, sometimes it's the guy saying, sorry.
Midgets.
Look, we
You
have
forgot
our own
the
issues
midgets.
in Colorado, so I'm waiting for that to come. Sometimes though, it's that idea comes up and we should have a fundraiser and that's a great idea. And someone goes, oh, we did that last year and it didn't work, and it dies right there. SigEp needs heroes. They need champions. We need leaders. And look, you are the best of the best for us. And so really it's your obligation to go back and to help bring other champions and other leaders and other heroes into the way you're thinking. about things. And sometimes that's all it takes. We have seen so many chapter experiences where one guy made a huge difference. And you got to be that guy in your chapter, and you got to rally other people around you that think like you do to make a difference.
The other piece of advice I would give you from studying fraternities around the country is you need to understand that, and this is a power that you need to use occasionally, not always. But how many of you think the fraternity is a democracy in your chapters? Are you guys a democracy? Or are you a representative republic? You were elected to make the best decisions for that chapter. If you're voting on stuff that you guys need to be making the decision on, then you're opening it up to that group mindset. That doesn't mean you never tell the chapter what to include them in the decision-making process. That's the wrong way to go about it. But understand that there's going to be times where you have to make a decision that isn't popular, but it's the right decision. And I encourage you to feel comfortable doing that. We grant you permission to do that, because that is going to be, you're going to have to do that when you're out of college, you're going to have to do that when you're in a job, you're going to have to do that when you're leading other men or other people all the time. So start practicing that now. Just don't overuse that, because then it becomes ineffective.
Seth, go ahead.
Many undergraduates and volunteers saw the TFM article about the National Board's decision on transgender members. Can you explain what happened and what this means for our chapters?
That'd be you, Chris.
Why did I get all the good stuff?
No,
Go ahead, Tom.
go ahead.
So here's what you need to know, okay? I think the article, we're not ashamed with what we came up with as far as a concept. I think we had a very good discussion with an expert in the area, because chapters were calling us and saying, hey, we're being asked by people that are going through recruitment, we're being asked by the university, we're being asked if this is okay. And we even had a couple of chapters say, we're interested in having someone join the fraternity. Is that okay? And so we had to make a clarification of our membership policy. At least I don't feel we changed or created a whole new policy. I feel like we clarified what is, is it okay to bring in people, and we had Jessica Pettit, who's an expert in the area, come and advise us for a while. So there was an immediacy of need to make that decision. And that's one of the reasons we did it not on a conclave year. We also didn't feel like it was any kind of bylaw change or anything that we wouldn't want to bring to you. I mean, we feel like we try to bring everything to you, to be honest.
So we should probably also highlight one other point of that discussion too, was, and we've hit on it a couple of times already, is that we want chapters to be in a position to self-govern. We want chapters to be in a position to make their own membership decisions. So the other part of that discussion, and I think this was echoed throughout the room, was that we don't need to do anything that's going to restrict or mandate. We need to put our chapters in a position to make decisions that they feel comfortable with about their membership.
Right. It doesn't force a chapter to take transgender students, and some chapters want to do that, and then they can. And we feel like, somebody was asking me yesterday at the bar, is this like a super liberal thing to do? And I was like, I don't see it as that. I see it as helping chapters to be able to make their own decision. Like, we're not mandating anybody to do it. In fact, in some ways, I see it as a fiscal decision, because if we come out and say this can't happen, the chances of somebody coming after a chapter is high.
Well, and we don't do DNA testing for membership.
Right.
So, I mean, how the hell are you going to control anything? Now, this is about the rights of the individual chapters to select their membership. We want to stand behind that right. No college or individual should be able to force membership that's not wanted.
Right.
And we're not going to be policing DNA tests to tell somebody they can't have a member that they do want to have. So this was not a change in policy of any sort. It was to reaffirm the chapter's responsibility for their own membership.
Yeah.
In light of the recent incidents with SAE at Oklahoma, many people say fraternities are not an inclusive environment. Is SigEp inclusive, and what can we do to improve in this area?
So as the Hispanic guy up here, I can tell you a few things. It's more inclusive now than when I joined, but that's anecdotal, right? That's me eyeballing the room and thinking back to when I went to CLA and people were like, "You got a funny accent, son," and I was like, "Okay, well, this is a little strange." Now I go to chapters and it seems to be more diverse. So one thing is we probably need to keep track of that better, and we're going to start doing that. And so let me back that up. Let me tell you why it's important to have diversity, and not necessarily just cultural diversity, but diversity. Because if we are going to be a fraternity where different thoughts are shared and we challenge each other and we elevate people, you need to have different people in the room. If we were all the same person, then that's kind of a boring fraternity, in my mind, if we're really talking about sound mind, right, and challenging each other. So are we inclusive? I think we can be inclusive. I think we can be better. I think we've talked about it as the board, and like, how can we be helping chapters to look in different places when they do recruitment? How can we help chapters to understand, and whether it's having people be members or having chapters do things with chapters that are in NPHC or other organizations on campus that are more diverse, so that you can have that conversation, have that inclusivity, at least in your programming. I mean, I just don't see a downside to that, and I think it's important for us to enable that in some way so that chapters can make the decision to do that.
Go ahead, Seth.
We've lost a lot of chapters over the last several years due to charter revocation. Are we being too reactive? What can we do to be more proactive and stop this behavior before it starts?
Brian.
Yeah, I think what's happening right now at our conclave is a great response. Not being driven by the board, not being driven by the staff, it's being driven by our undergraduates, saying, this is what we want to be about. This is the expectation that we want to hold every single chapter to. And that's a really positive thing. I mentioned earlier the staff's approach. I ask our chapter services team to come into a chapter and ask tough questions. And it's not trying to catch a chapter losing. It's trying to challenge a chapter to think a little differently about the potential that it has and how it can realize that potential. Every single member of that staff that works in Richmond wants to see the people in this room be successful. And that's why they chose to come to Richmond to work. That's why they continue to work for the staff. They want to see this group be successful. So the two things that I would just include is I'm very enthusiastic about the undergraduate decision and what could happen at this conclave. And the other is the staff is going to continue to be as proactive as possible in challenging thinking and challenging behavior, and hopefully challenging our chapters to a place where we're clearly, as Tom said, clearly different and treated differently by the administration, because it is so evident in our actions, not just our words.
I think having sat on the board for 10 years, how long have you been on the board?
Forever? 14.
14. So things have changed over time. And I remember the list of at-risk chapters: manpower, academics, or bad behavior, being the three big topics. The list was pretty long, and we would, keep extending. And I think that we crossed a line several years ago to say there's got to be a limit, and we have to have standards as an organization. And all of the rhetoric from earlier this morning and earlier here about moving forward, being drugged down by small, underperforming chapters is just not any way to be great. And so I think we've taken a more aggressive position to make sure that the standards are clear, that we provide the help, and then when you cross the line, and you move on. And it's I think our learning is that it's better to come back than to try and resurrect something that's spoiled.
And look, we all travel to chapters around the country, and you've told us this. You've said to, I've had a lot of people say to me, look, if our chapter did what that one did on that school, this fraternity at that school, you should shut them down. That's embarrassing to me and my family and my brothers. And we hear that, and we take it seriously. And so losing a chapter is one of the most painful exercises that we go through, yet it's also one of the most necessary if they can't uphold the standards that you've set for all of our chapters.
It would be hypocritical of us to say to you, you need to control and even expel some of your members that don't align with the values of the organization, and then us not do that to chapters that exhibit the same behavior. Now, I think the question was phrased, shouldn't we be more proactive instead of reactive? I think we are being proactive.
Yeah, we've gone from 262 chapters in the last 7 years down to, we're at 230 right now. And that's not at all a result of being reactive.
Right. To me, reactive is waiting until there's a tragedy on your campus that SigEp is involved in, and then having to deal with all of that and then close the chapter. Proactive is seeing the boiling pot, trying to turn the oven off, and then only if the chapter keeps trying to turn the oven back on do we have to take action. And I think that's what you've seen, is us try and stop tragedies from happening, and then some chapters just not wanting to deal with that.
The conversation about dry housing has sparked a lot of questions. The main theme seems to be, if our chapter chooses to go to a dry facility, what impact could this have on our insurance fees?
Can you say that one more time?
If a chapter chooses to make their facility dry, what impact could this have on their insurance fees?
I mean, Chris is the money guy, so I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, and I get all the fun ones. So I would say that this body can legislate this weekend, with some assistance from the staff and an understanding of the budget, that if a chapter chooses to do that, which in essence should minimize their risk exposure, that they should pay less in insurance for that. And that the chapters that have more incidents pay a surcharge. And so I think, I can't speak for the whole board, but my guess is the board would be very receptive to chapters that manage their risk aggressively, having a direct economic benefit of that.
Yeah,
Nothing's in place today, though.
Correct, nothing's in place.
Not
for a dry facility.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, the board has peripherally, I think, hypothetically at some point talked about alcohol-free housing, but we've never really put it on the table as something specific for now. We assume that we believe that there are some chapters that want to do that, and again, we're going to facilitate that for them in any way they can if you guys want to do that.
I think if we walked out of here on Sunday and the Grand Chapter had mandated that housing was going to be alcohol-free, we would be able to dramatically negotiate our insurance rates. Your cost would go down. Without a doubt, your cost would go down. But that's something the Grand Chapter's got to talk about.
Yeah.
That's for you guys.
Yeah. Go ahead, Seth.
An undergraduate spends a lot of his time online. Why haven't we taken the B&P online or created an app to improve the experience?
What a great idea.
That's an awesome idea.
It's just giving away my 2 o'clock. This is all right.
What a great idea.
This is fantastic. Whoever asked that question, we're in the process of that right now. We've got some skins and architecture that we're intending to just briefly show off this afternoon in the Grand Chapter's legislative session. The staff's been hard at work, interacting with a lot of undergraduates, a lot of volunteers of what we could do to eliminate the administrative burdens and frustrations of the Balanced Man program and freeing up more time to focus on the experience. Change challenge meetings so that there's not a, hey, what'd you do? Let me check this box and let's work through the administrative side of this. We turn those conversations into something that are extremely productive, focused on the individual, his development, what's next, and eliminate all of this administrative burden that really holds back a lot of those good, engaging discussions that we want to have in our challenge meetings. So we're working on it. We've made a lot of progress. Like most things, we're needing to go find a little bit more money to cross the finish line here, but we've made a lot of progress.
Yeah, I think we all agree that we want to be the most user-friendly, technically advanced group too. Like we know that that's where students want to be, and it's a big attractor. So it's going to help facilitate the program as well, which is going to make the educational experience even better.
Yeah. Go ahead, Seth. Probably need additional.
A lot of people have said that their chapter has a strong alumni base, but they seem to be more focused on the house or networking with other alumni. How can we or headquarters help change that focus and get their chapter more volunteer support?
Yeah, so one of my responsibilities as SigEp's Chief Executive Officer is I also sit on SigEp National Housing's board as its Secretary Treasurer. And we had this conversation for probably 12 to 18 months, and just recently rolled out a property management service program where if an AVC is needing to have assistance with leasing, move-in, move-out, financials, even tax filings, managing security deposits, insurance, all of the things that go into managing a facility. And it gets very time-consuming, and we realize that volunteers have other things going on, and a lot of them would rather focus on the undergraduates as well. But we rolled out this program. It's new. We have 3 chapters right now that have already enrolled. We have about 12 that have expressed an interest in enrolling in that program over the next 12 months. And so we expect to grow it and do everything that we can to help an AVC spend time on undergraduates and feel very confident in the management of the facility. And I'll say that also with a caveat of this program is not intending at all to either move someone out of the way, or rather to empower an individual who is focused on a house to do more, to get additional resources and help make that chapter facility the best facility that it can be for our undergraduate experience.
It sounded like, and I had a little trouble hearing the question, but it also sounded like, how do we communicate with our alumni and engage them? And one of the ways that you've got to do that is to have some sort of ongoing, consistent communication effort, which is hard when you have that job, your sophomore, junior year, then you pass it off to someone else. So the AVC has to be involved. Your chapter should have a website for alumni. You should have a newsletter, whether it's electronic or for some of us older guys, even a hard copy. And 80% of that newsletter should be about the other old guys, not just what's going on at the chapter. And a lot of communications efforts from chapters are the other way around. 80% of here's what we did, and here are the new guys, and here's the function that we had, and the fundraiser that we did, and 20% about you, and they want to hear about each other. And that's how you engage them, is you let them connect with each other.
Yeah. There's a property management program that's going on at Conclave. If anyone is interested in swinging by that, you can also meet with the SC&H SigEp National Housing staff that's going to be there and continue this discussion.
Can I throw one other thing in there?
Of course.
One of the things that I found, in looking at fraternities also is chapters that have someone who's not a SigEp advising them or as part of the advising team have incredible success. It's that outsider concept that we were talking about earlier. Okay, I would encourage you to have a parent on your AVC or on your advising team, have a woman. Maybe it's a mom, maybe it's somebody else, someone who works on that campus. I mean, some of your campuses are in places where alums may not live, or they're 2 hours away. That doesn't mean you can't find advisors who aren't SigEps. There are probably advisors there's probably people on that campus who aren't Greek, men who aren't Greek, who after a couple of years of working with you would say, hey, I want to be a SigEp. And we have a way of doing that, of having them join the organization. So there's a lot of creative ways to do that, and really it's up to us to help facilitate a lot of that too, but don't just think internally. Of course, we would love all of our alums to live 10 minutes from you and provide you with all the guidance you want, but sometimes it just doesn't work that way.
So for time, we're probably going to need to move on. Are there any concluding thoughts, I guess, that you guys would like to share with those that are here?
The only thing I would add is we serve at your pleasure. We're honored to do it. We know how much you trust us to guide the business side of the fraternity between conclaves. But when we're at conclave, this is your show, and you do make the decisions, and that's part of the beauty of how this works. So just know that I know for all of us, the board members that aren't here, we're very, very grateful for the chance to serve, and we love it, and it's very meaningful to us. So thank you for that.
I'd end with where I started. I think we're at a pivot point in our history. This, I think, will prove to be a historic conclave, and it's exciting from that standpoint, but we need bold leadership going forward, and that needs to come from the grassroots, from the chapters, from the undergraduates.
The theme of this conclave is I believe, right? So I want to tell you what I believe. I believe in two things, and I tell the guys that I work with and other chapters these two things. I believe that if fraternity is done right, there's nothing better for any college kid, any college man to go through as an experience for leadership, social growth, personal development. I believe that when it's done right, it's the best thing. It can also be damaging if it's done wrong. And the difference for me is, and where my mindset it always is this shouldn't be your last chance to be a boy. This should be helping you on your journey to be a man. And that's, to me, why SigEp has differentiated itself from other folks. And I encourage you to take those concepts back to your chapters and your alumni and kind of infuse that into their culture. Because I think if you just stick with that and the values and cardinal principles that we have, it's hard for us to do this wrong.
So I'll add one last thing, and that's just maybe a reiteration of it is our job to support chapters, to add value, to make the experience so meaningful on each one of the campuses that we are on that men competitively pursue membership in Sigma Phi Epsilon. I think what we've tried to do over the last few years, and we talk a lot about between conclaves, is really maximize that value. We've tried to support the BMP to the best of our ability. I mentioned the property management services that we've rolled out. We even listened to a lot of the feedback we've gotten about ritual equipment. And if you haven't been out underneath the Parthenon, the new stuff is out there. More durable, should last longer, better quality, and just enhance the experience altogether. We talked about the Balanced Man Program app. Post-collegiate preparedness is something that we just didn't talk about, career preparedness, but you're going to see 45 companies here at this conclave they're going to be here on Saturday, and they're going to be talking to our undergraduate brothers. In some cases, they may be offering opportunities for employment or internships. But regardless, they're here to help. So there's a lot going on. And the one thing that I'll conclude on is that we have this residential learning community program that we don't talk often about or enough about. And it is something that every time I sit down with someone in higher education, they point out in the very next breath after the Balanced Man Program of what they are so excited about in terms of what SigEp is doing. And there's a handful of chapters. One of them or three of them actually are with us here. And as we conclude this session, we wanted to ask that they come up to the stage. Being different is hard. And we talked about having the confidence to be different on campus day to day, and to not fall back towards the mean, to continue to confidently model the way. And that's what Illinois Alpha has done. That's what Ohio State has done, and that's what Nebraska has done. Those three groups have come together, and they've put together a grant that advances residential learning community projects and can help enhance the environment that so oftentimes leads to good behavior or will influence behavior and determine the type of individual that's going to come to our houses and pursue membership. So at this time, I'd like to ask that representatives from those 3 chapters come to the stage. And they intend to make a presentation here before we conclude. So can the guys from Illinois and Ohio State and Nebraska come up?
Thanks, Brian. My name is Jameson Gray, a 2013 alum from Illinois Alpha. For 2 decades, our chapter, Illinois Alpha, has made the residential learning concept a top priority. And it's not just about focusing on it from a brick and mortar perspective. We seek to understand how our chapter home drives innovation in learning in our house and provides a positive, supporting, and inviting environment for our brothers to collaborate in that learning fashion always. Many of this year's applicants demonstrated what it meant to be a strong RLC. From strong university partnerships to active faculty fellow engagement, it was clear that many chapters across the country are doing great things. However, and on behalf of the entire Pay It Forward grant team, Ohio State, Nebraska Alpha, Illinois Alpha, and everyone else, we thank all of the applicants. However, today we get to celebrate 2 of those great chapters. So, without further ado, New Jersey Alpha RLC of the Stevens Institute of Technology and Oklahoma Alpha of Oklahoma State University will each receive a $2,500 grant to support their RLC initiatives. In addition, the generous volunteers of those home chapters will be matching that grant for a total of $10,000 of support for RLC for SigEp. So will the delegates from New Jersey Alpha and Oklahoma Alpha please come up to the stage to receive their grant. Thank you, and let's congratulate the winners.